Hello, I'm back again. I haven't been made any new videos for any type of dishes lately. It's been a while, so at a request, I wanted to show you guys can see how I make actually one of my dishes called chili. It's an actual chili dish. I usually use three different meats, plus of course the bacon. Everything tastes good with bacon. Um, you can see we have some of the main meats right here. We have the pork, which is a basic pork loin. We have about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. The regular chili meat, which is about 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds also. And we have some fajita meat, which is a beef skirt steak, which is about a pound. You can do well with a pound. Just be sure to take off all the fat that you can on the skin, especially. You don't want that rubbery taste to it. And it's probably preferably to tenderize the fajita a little bit, either with some lime juice or even some basic tenderizer. But just don't do it no more than half an hour because they get too tender and then it's gonna start falling apart when you cook it. But you want to tenderize it a little bit with a little bit of meat tenderizer also. Pork not so much. Just make sure it's somewhat lean. You want a little bit of fat. That's why I like to use a little bit more pork. Usually about 2 pounds to a pound and a half to a pound of fajita. And some of the other items that we're going to be using, as you can see, we have of course the Worcestershire sauce. We're going to probably use about half a cup. And we're also going to use some dark beer. This is actually about a pint. That's about how much we're going to use. Probably all of it. And also the bacon. The bacon that you want to use is a smoked sweet bacon. This time I picked up and I found some smoky maple bacon, and that's what I found when I went to the department store. The other items I'm going to be using, of course, some salt as needed. Probably a couple of cloves of garlic, and about 2 tablespoons of oregano. Not so much because it seems to be pretty strong. And to add some heat, I'll probably add a couple of serrano peppers. Not going to make it too hot, so I'll take out the seeds just to add some flavor. But it'll still come out a little bit hot. And the other items we're going to be making that also helps in the flavor is smoked paprika. We'll probably use about a tablespoon of this also, maybe 2 teaspoons, not so much as a tablespoon, maybe 2 teaspoons. Some white pepper, also depending as needed, we'll probably use about 1 teaspoon, not so much because it's pretty strong, and some sweet paprika. And some of the other items, of course, we're going to use about half an onion. I'll use the whole green a green pepper, some small can of chipotle sauce. This is about 7 ounces. 7 to 8 ounces is fine. This one can should be fine. But like some other people like the flavor of chipotle, they'll probably add 2 cans. I've done it before. And 2 small cans of tomato paste. It's gonna add the tomato flavor. And usually, if you want to add more tomatoes, you add some tomatoes, either chopped tomatoes or maybe a small chili style. This one's a chili style canned tomatoes. You can add about 2 cans of these. These are the larger cans, which is these are about 14 ounces, so maybe about 28 ounces of tomatoes. But you don't want to add the canned tomatoes until the end, because what we're actually going to do, we're going to cook it on the slow cooker. But first, I'll actually pan fry these items and halfway cook them, and then put them on the slow cooker. And the other items I'm going to also add to it, of course, is beans. Let me grab those. I'm going to put some pinto beans. Just need 1 can, and kidney beans. Not many people like the beans, but I actually add it because it adds a little bit of starchiness to it. I actually love the bean flavor to add some more. Again, with these, the beans, you don't want to add them until like maybe an hour before it's done. Typically, once you put halfway cook all the meats and put all the seasoning, all the beer, all the everything in there, um, you wanna we're gonna do that at least for 3 hours, slow at medium to high heat on the slow cooker, on the and usually about an hour before it comes out. So maybe on the third or fourth hour, you can actually start adding the beans. Because if you add this too soon, they're gonna disappear and dissolve. Same thing with the tomatoes. I like it a little chunky, so you could add this about an hour before or sooner. You could add some before and then another can, just to add a little bit of chunkiness about an hour before, maybe 45 minutes before it's almost done. Mostly you're gonna cook everything pan fried and then slow cook it for another 3 hours. Now I'm going to explain a little bit about cutting these actual types of meat that we have with pork and the fajita, and of course the bacon. Um, on the pork, of course we're using pork loin this time, but sometimes you could even also use ground pork. But it tastes. I've known to try it different ways, and it always comes out with chunks of meat, the chunks of pork. So the pork loin is usually pretty good. You want to try to shoot it into actually little thin slices. because this is not going to shrink that much. So it's good to have like little strips on the pork. And on the beef, you want those a little bit bigger because they are going to shrink. Red meat will actually shrink a little bit while you're cooking it. So you want these like little bite-sized morsels. You see this like this, maybe about half an inch by half inch square, something like that to that effect. But you want the beef to be a little bit bigger than the strips. So you want them a little bit small, but not too big, because you want them just to have a little bite when you actually eat the chili later on when it's physically cooked. And on the bacon, the thing I recommend about the bacon, you want it to be a little bit frozen. It's easier to cut, but you want to try to cut these as small as you can. Of course, it's better to have these a little bit small, because when you fry it up later on, we're gonna have to fry these up, slow frying it. You want these to be a little bit frozen. It's easier to cut. Right now it's not that frozen, but you want it a little bit frozen. You want to cut them to small as possible you can, and go ahead and put that fat in. You're gonna use that fat. It's gonna give it a lot of flavor. So just try to shoot them to small little pieces, very small, like 1/4 inch, very small, as small as you can. Like I said, try to have it a little bit frozen, and it's easier to cut. Right now it's kind of slippery, so try to cut these at least very small, as small as you can, and it will help you also in the cooking. I'm back again. Like I said, we're gonna go ahead and use the slow cooker. This is a little bit larger than normal. The normal, I think, I believe it's 4 quarts. This is actually 6 quarts. I did add a little bit of Worcestershire sauce. I did marinate it maybe about 15 minutes. The pork slices, the small little pork slices, and the fajita, the beef skirt steak. I marinated a little bit with some Worcestershire sauce. Make sure it absorbs some of the flavor. You can see here I have the small sliced, very small, petite bacon. The chili meat, really, there's nothing to it. You're just going to fry it up and cook it separate, and it should break apart. Just make it, of course, you got to break it up as you cook it. So we're going to let these marinate for about 15 minutes, and then we'll go ahead and demonstrate how we're going to cook this. I actually already turned the slow cooker on high to the warm. What I'm going to do is I usually put about half of the bottle in there so it can start evaporating some of the alcohol. And then the other half, I'll actually cook it while I'm cooking with the meat. I'll throw it in there with the meat just to add a little bit of moisture. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let me see if I can open this up. I'll look for a can opener. So I'm just going to put about half inside the slow cooker, just so I can start evaporating. I'm going to be throwing everything else in there, the meats and the spices. Just put about half. Get this ready. We're going to cook it with the meats. And I got my little mortar and pestle, and of course we're going to actually use that to crush some of the oregano leaves. And like I said, we're going to use about 2 teaspoons, probably about 1.5 tablespoons equivalent. And of course, you want this ground up as much as you can. I'll use a little bit of kosher salt in there to help me crush it in there. So we'll go ahead and get this ready and the spices ready and get the skillet ready before we can do the individual frying. Alright? Alright, now we're going to go ahead and cook the meats. Put about 2 tablespoons of oil in each pan. I'm going to use one for the beef and one for the pork, which of course the pork is the bacon and the extra pork loin. I'm going to go ahead and start frying this. I'm going to start with the red meat. Of course, the fajita cooks a little bit longer, so I'm going to throw that in first. Remember, it's about 1.5 pounds. I'm going to fry that up. Usually we'll do that for about 5 or 10 minutes. Just go ahead and spread it out. The thing about the bacon, that's the one you're going to have to do next. You have to slow cook this one because you don't want to burn the bacon. So, just slow fry it up. This is the one that's going to take the longest, the bacon. You want to do it slow so you won't burn the actual bacon. It'll actually turn to little small cubettes. And it'll get even smaller as it cooks inside with the slow cooker. It's fry about 10 minutes. Move it around, make sure it's about halfway cooked, and then you can go ahead and throw in the chili meat. So we'll go ahead and do that, and we'll let that simmer for about at least 10 minutes. We'll get it kind of slow. Cook this because you don't want to burn it. Try to chop it up as much as you can. Do that for a little bit. Now the fajita was semi-cooked, I go ahead and throw in the chili meat. The bacon is starting to fry. You want to try to cook this also. You don't have to cook it all the way because you're going to put it back into the, I brought over the slow cooker. We'll go ahead and transfer it close by. It's going to come down. Stir this a little bit to break it up because you want it in small pieces. We cut them up so they're still kind of, you don't have to stick together. Go ahead and do that. And I already ground up my my actual oregano. You see that? I'm gonna go ahead and throw it in right now, but I'm gonna wait till I get some more liquid. And when you finish cooking these halfway, the beef, you can go ahead and just throw with all the juices because later on you'll decant, which is actually remove the oil from the top layer. So eventually, when you put everything up together, you have a lot of extra water and extra fat, extra grease. You're gonna have to be able to pull that out from the top later when it's almost cooked. Now, if you can see the bacon, it's almost semi-crispy. We're gonna go ahead and throw it into the slow cooker with grease and all. You can use that. It's gonna give it some good flavor. The only thing we have down in there is just about half a bottle of the dark beer. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. We have this throw all that oil in there. It's gonna give it some flavor. Later on, when it's almost cooked, we'll have to decant some of the grease when it floats up to the top. Same thing with the red meat and the beef. See how it's like little small chunks? That's what you want. And it's like 3/4 of the way cooked. That's fine. It's a little bit, it looks like it's cooked on the outside, but it's still pink inside. That's what you want. Because remember, you can still have it in there for about anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending how long it takes to cook the actual meat. You'll feel it nice and tender when it's almost done. So I'm going to throw this in. Still got to cook that pork. Now that we put the pork in, see it's maybe a little bit too big, but it's okay. Hopefully it'll shrink over time. We got at least 2 hours here for sure. We're gonna have to cook it here. Now we put everything in, all the paste, the tomato, chipotle sauce, and all the powdered seasoning. We're gonna go and put some of the other stuff right now. These are the green peppers. I used about almost half, not quite half. But you want to come in small cubits, very small. See how you can see it, because they're not going to dissolve much. So in 2 hours, you want to put these in first. So then put them in. I like to have a little bit of a bite, but if you don't cut them small enough, they'll be too big. They're going to be too big. Don't want too much green peppers. The serranos, like I said, I took out the seeds and the actual vein. I don't want it to be spicy, just to give it some flavor. I think I just cut back to one large serrano. I didn't want it to be hot. Hopefully it shouldn't be too hot. And of course the white onions or the yellow onions, whichever you find. It's probably a little bit sweeter as the yellow onions. Kind of small also, because I don't want to bite into these. I want them to be a little bit dissolved. These will dissolve pretty quick. We'll put that in. Stir it a little bit. Remember, later on we still have to put the beans, maybe in about 2 hours from now. See, like I said, almost everything here is cooked, but it's maybe three-quarters of the way cooked. After you did all the frying up and everything, all the meat, it's still a little raw, but inside the pan it's going to give it some. It's going to cook even slower and longer. And it's going to tenderize that pork and the fajita meat. It's going to be nice and soft. Mix it up a little bit. Put some salt in it. A really haven't put any salt. Probably put about a tablespoon of salt. It's really not much salt. And the one thing I forgot to put, a little bit of brown sugar. Some of the recipes usually ask about maybe about half a cup of brown sugar, but usually that stuff usually gives me a heartburn. So I only put about a couple of tablespoons of brown sugar just to add some sweetness. And I also forgot the garlic. For this size of dish, I'll probably only put 2 small cloves of garlic. That should be enough. So we'll go ahead and stop here and finish adding the less minor stuff and put everything in. And we'll wait for about 2 hours. It's been about an hour already. I already had 2 cans of tomato, the chili style or little small petite tomatoes. Go ahead and add that. And stir it in a little bit. It's almost full. So put it in there. And I'm going to put that 2 tablespoons of brown sugar also. I don't want to put too much. Makes it too sweet. Just 2 tablespoons is fine. A little bit. It's fine. Not too much. And as you can see, we rarely used any type of Worcestershire sauce. This was full all the way to the top. When I go ahead and add some more, I usually get at least 1/3 of the way. This actually gives it some good flavor. But like I said, this also adds salt. So later on, we'll try to taste it. Maybe about an hour when we add the beans, see how it tastes. Let's stir that in. At least another hour and a half till we put the beans in. Alright, that looks good. Thick. So we'll still make it a little bit more thick. We'll talk about that a little bit when we add the beans. We'll put a little bit of flour, maybe a little bit thicker than this. Alright, we'll let it sit there for about an hour and a half. Alright, we got about 45 minutes to an hour left. It's already starting to boil a little bit. You can see a little bit of the fat. We're not going to go ahead and decant that yet. We still need to add the beans. And try to get rid of some of the water as much as you can. These are regular pinto beans. That's when we want to add them in. Let's just add a little bit of starchiness to it. And we got the red kidney beans. It's almost toppling to the top. You can see. And I'm going to add a little bit of tomatoes just to give it a little bit more appearance, add a little bit of chunkiness. And we were talking about earlier about adding a little bit of thickness to the chili. So I add about 3 tablespoons of flour, 2.5 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons should be fine. Maybe half a cup of water. And just go ahead and stir it in separately in a separate bowl because you don't want to throw it in there, it'll get all clumpy. Try to whisk it all out. And this is what's actually going to thicken. And it's also going to cook for the next 30 to 45 minutes, along with the beans and the tomatoes and I'm going to put that in. Mix that up a little bit. It's going to be nice and with thickness. It's going to add some thickness to it. And we add those tomatoes. I already tasted it. It needs a little bit more salt. Sometimes I also like to put some seasoned salt for that. It's almost toppling. Actually, take some tomatoes out. So, pulls them out later. We'll see what happens. You can see the grease on top. That's what we're going to have to remove later. So we'll mix it in because you want to mix that flour and you want it to cook for the next 30 to 45 minutes. And I already tasted it. I'm going to put a little bit of seasoned salt. Since we have the tomatoes, we need to put in more salt. If you want to make it a little bit sweeter, instead of sugar, you can also put a little bit of barbecue sauce. I also put about 2 or 3 tablespoons easily. If you want more, you could also to taste. I usually add a little bit of barbecue sauce. And don't get, depending on what you guys like, but I like it a little sweet. So you can also add a little bit of barbecue sauce. Worst comes to worst, you could also add another little container of tomato paste. The tomato paste is also very sweet, so you can add that also. So I usually put 2 only, but maybe the third will make it even sweeter with the barbecue sauce. People get hard for the barbecue sauce. Okay, so we'll wait there for another 20 minutes and see what happens, and we should be cooked by the time it's done. Alright, it's already been about 3 hours. And we did everything to it. What you do is you gotta check to see if there's any excess grease. You want to take that grease off. You look at it, have a little bit on top. You don't take off some of that grease. It's mostly grease on top. You don't take some of that off. Just a little bit. It didn't collect too much. I'm gonna leave it like that. Stir it a little bit. It's already done. I already put enough salt as needed. Like I said, eventually if you let it sit there long enough, the grease will float to the top and you can remove some of the grease. I'm gonna go ahead and serve myself some so you can see. Go, see that? A little bit of chunkiness, a little creaminess, because we add a little bit of flour to make it a little thick. And what goes best with corn? With chili, we got some cornbread. And go ahead and taste it. See what it tastes like. It should taste pretty good. A little bit. Really good. And that's how you do it. Alright, that completes my dish. Hopefully you guys can make this at the house also. Alright, thank you.